Hello students, welcome again. Last time we discussed evolution of programming languages. Today we'll be seeing programming paradigms. So let's start with the meaning of paradigm. The word paradigm means way of doing something. So programming paradigm means way of programming or way of organizing your code. Okay, way of organizing your code. Now there are two ways in which you can organize your code. One is procedure oriented and the other is object oriented. In procedure oriented, the focus is on procedure, and in object oriented, the focus is on data. Okay. So since in procedure oriented programming, the focus is on procedure, less importance is given to data. By less importance, I mean that the data is not secure, and how it is not secure, we'll be looking at it. So first, let us understand what is the methodology here. Okay, so in procedure oriented, you take a complex problem and you divide it into many sub problems. Okay, you take a bigger problem and you divide it into smaller problems, and each smaller problem will be represented in its solution through functions. Okay, functions or procedures. Now functions in coding means collection of statements. In the last session we saw that a program is nothing but collection of instructions. Okay, so let's say if you have got 4 lines of statements, each line denotes some particular instruction. Now when you combine certain statements, certain instructions inside a group, and you give it a name, that is called function. What is the benefit of creating a function? The benefit of creating a function is that you don't have to rewrite the code. So for example, let's say you have created a calculator program. Okay, you have created a calculator program, and in that program you have a function. You have a function to add two numbers. Okay, now in future if you want to write a code for adding two numbers, you don't need to write the same code again. Okay, in the future if you create another software which requires you to add two numbers, you will not write the same code again. Okay, it will simply be a waste of time, and you don't want to waste your time. So what will you do is you remember that, oh, I had earlier created a function to add two numbers. So what you'll do is you simply call the function. So again I'm repeating, function is a collection of instructions, and that collection is given a name, and if you call that name, okay, that means you are calling that particular function. So simply by calling the function, all those statements present inside the function will be executed line by line. So I hope the meaning of function is clear. And even if you still do not understand it, don't worry, functions will be dealt with in future, okay, in detail. But for now, remember that function and procedures are same thing. Okay, So in procedure-oriented programming, a big problem is broken down into many smaller problems, and each problem will have its solution in terms of procedures or functions. So in procedure-oriented programming, the focus is on procedure, okay, not data. And in a program, since you have many functions, okay, many sub functions, they need to have certain level of communication among themselves, okay, and that communication is done either through global variables, okay, or passing parameters. Now I'll not go into what are parameters, but global variable, what do I mean by global variable? Let's look at this diagram. So here in this diagram you can see that the program has been divided into many functions, okay, by the name of function 1, function 2, up till function 8, okay. So these functions represent a single program, a single solution for a big problem. Okay, you broke down the big problem into 8 sub-problems, okay, and those sub-problems you are solving inside each function, okay. So 8 functions are giving you the solution for one main problem, okay. Now the order of execution of these functions, okay. So suppose, let's say this program is dealing with cooking some dish, okay, let's say rice, dal and vegetable, okay. So let's say you have decided that function 1 will do the job of cooking rice, function 2 will do the job of cooking dal, and function 3 will do the job of cooking vegetables, okay. But when you came to function 3, you felt the need that first you should purchase the vegetables, so you delegated that job to function 5, and so on and so on, okay. You divided divided each task into functions, okay. Now when all these functions execute, they must execute in some order, isn't it? They must execute in some order, and that order is decided by one main function. So this is your main function. This will control the execution of all the rest of the functions. This is procedure oriented programming, okay. Now let's go a bit deeper into this diagram and just focus on 3 functions, okay. Function 1, function 2 and function 3. This should be 3. So in function 1 you can see there is something called local data. In function 2 also there is something called local data. Similarly, same is the case for function 3, and there is another kind of data called global data, okay. Global data. So first of all, understand the need of data, okay. The need of data in software, you basically have two things: data and logic, or you can say function. Data and function. So the function has got the capability to operate on the data. Okay, so data, let's say I've got two variables. Okay, two variables of variables, don't worry about what are variables now. Okay, variable simply means container which can store data. Okay, so I was explaining the composition of a software basically consists of two things. I told you that data and functions. Function is the piece of code which will operate upon the data. Function is the piece of code which will operate upon the data. Okay, now the data can be stored either inside the function or outside of the function. If it is stored inside the function, it is known as local data. If it is stored outside the function, it is known as global data. The local data is accessible only inside the function, whereas the global data, okay, they are accessible to all the functions, okay. And herein lies the problem of procedure oriented programming. Okay, the problem, I'll repeat, the problem is that all the functions can access global data, and any function can change this global data at any time. Now let's go back to our slide. So let's look at this point. Function can communicate by global variable. Okay, the meaning is that, let's say function 1 changes the value of a global data. Okay, so function 2 can know that value of the global data has been changed. Function 1 has done the changes, and function 2 can recognize that the value has been changed. So you can see that there is some sort of communication between function 1 and function 2. Now next, data moves freely from one function to another function. Okay, so the this this is a problem because there is no clear separation that which data should be controlled, should be allowed to be changed, by which function. Any function can change any global data. That is the biggest problem in procedure oriented programming. Okay, and when we study object oriented programming, we'll see that how this problem is solved. Okay, so this movement, free movement of data is restricted in object oriented programming, and that's how the problem is solved. Next is functions change the value of data at any time from any place. So already been through this. And it uses top down programming approach. Top down means you take a big problem and you divide it into many smaller problems. You keep on dividing until you cannot divide it further. Okay, so that is known as top down approach. Big problem is divided into small problems, and then you find the solution for each of the small problems. Okay, next. Now let's look at the limitations of procedure oriented. Okay, first is less attention is given to data, already explained. Okay, that data is accessible to all the functions. If in a program you have 1,000 functions, any one of the functions can change the data, the global data. Okay, and there lies the problem. So this is the first limitation. Next, data and functions are separate from each other. Okay, data and functions are separate. Now this is very important. Data and functions are separate. Earlier, I told you that software consists of two things. No matter how complex the software is, okay, it may be a software for a simple thing like a calculator, or it may be something as complex like a rocket, okay, software operating in a rocket, okay. So you can imagine the complexity of software in a rocket, okay. So calculator is relatively simple than rocket. So data and functions, if you have got thousands of functions in a program, there is no grouping, okay, there is no grouping that which function should be given the authorization to change which data. This is not there in procedure oriented. This is the one of the biggest problems, okay, in POP. Okay, next point already explained. Global data can be changed by any function. Okay, difficult to track. Next point is difficult to track. Why it is difficult? Because if you have 1,000 functions, which function made the changes is difficult to find. Okay, it is very difficult to find. And limited code reusability. It means what? Suppose you wrote a program in which you have got, let's say, 3 or 4 functions, okay, like a simple calculator program. So if you want to reuse that calculator program in some another big program, okay, in some another big program, let's say you first of all wrote a simple calculator and later on you are making a scientific calculator, okay, which has got a lot more complex calculations to do. So you'll not rewrite the code, you will not rewrite the code for the simple calculations in your in your scientific calculator. You'll simply call your existing functions, okay. So that is known as code reusability. Now if you have got thousands of functions, okay, it will be difficult to implement already written code in a new project, okay. So this is called limited code reusability. You can't really reuse that much if your program is complex. If your program is complex and written in procedure oriented programming language, it will be difficult to reuse your existing code, okay. Okay, procedure oriented is, it's fine for small software systems, okay, but it's not gonna work for large and complex systems. So we'll stop here today, okay? And in the next session, I will be discussing object-oriented programming. So please watch the video properly and rewatch it. If you don't understand it once, you can rewatch it, okay? And tomorrow we'll be covering object-oriented programming, and we'll see how it provides solution for all the problems raised by procedure oriented programming, okay. And just to give you a quick summary, what did we discuss today? We discussed procedure oriented programming. We understood that procedure oriented programming divides a big problem into many smaller problems, and the smaller problems are handled by different procedures or functions, okay, and all the functions combined together represent the solution of the problem. But we saw that this system is okay if the program size is small, if the complexity is small, but as the complexity gets larger, our program size will increase and it will be difficult to maintain and reuse the code. Okay, so we'll stop here. Thank you.